Okay, thanks for tuning in again. We're moving on to Module 4, which is Exploration. It has a difficulty of 3 of 5, and it adds 5 minutes per player. So I've set up a small map here. This is not a valid map per se, but the one thing to note immediately is the home planet is face up, which in this case is Terra Nova. That's the Arctic Dominion's home planet. And then the center tile, which in this case is the star Proxima Centauri. That could also be the console tile, right? But the rest of the planet tiles are face down. The first thing to point out with this is if you are not using Module 5, which is the new planet tiles, you start the game, if you are not using Edge of Extinction, by choosing one of the two adjacent tiles, looking at it, and then flipping it back down. You get sort of a glimpse of your adjacent tiles. Now, if you're using Edge of Extinction, again, without the new tiles, the new planet tiles from Event Horizon, you get a chance to look at both of these tiles that are adjacent to you and choose one, flip it face up, right? And then do the setup for Edge of Extinction, which again is 3 population on your home planet, 2 carriers, a raider, and then on whichever planet you choose, another raider and a single population. Now we'll talk about this on the next module, but if you are using Exploration, Module 4, and the new planets, Module 5, then you pick one random planet that is either a CP planet, Axinium planet, or a Phasium planet at random. You get to choose which one you want. And none of the new tiles, those cannot be adjacent to your home planet. And based on that tile that you get, when you build the map, you flip it face up next to your home planet. So that becomes obviously your adjacent planet for the setup for Edge of Extinction, and then if you're not playing with Edge of Extinction, it's just another tile that's up, but it ensures that you're not going to get one of these new planets adjacent to you necessarily. I guess that's what they're going for there. Okay, so I'm using Edge of Extinction in this case, so let's take a look at the 2 tiles that are adjacent. So I have Sol, which is a CP planet, victory points 2 at the end, and 5 resources of CP. And then I also, adjacent to me, have Wooden, and that is Phasium with a starting resource value of 5 and 2 victory points at the end. So I'm gonna take Phasium, and then I will flip this one. I know what this one is now, but I'll flip it face down as per the Exploration, and put my home planet here. And now I can continue my setup for the Edge of Extinction starting point. Okay, so the setup is done now for Edge of Extinction. I've got the 2 carriers, the raider on my home planet here, the 3 population cubes. It's kind of cut off, but we'll focus on this area, right? Here's the other raider and the single population cube. And so the Exploration module, and we already know what this is, right? Because we were able to look at it, but we'll use this as the example. So if your ship during the conquest stage ship movement ends up on a tile that's face down, within this you flip it face up, which we sort of knew what that was going to be, right? And at that point we draw from the event deck, which are the new cards that come with Event Horizon. So from these cards, there's a number of different types of cards that you can get. Now it's either going to be a Bane type card, which has this evil-looking red-eyed dude with some sort of grill on his face, and these are generally unfortunate events for you. It could be a Boon, which that prosperity sounds good already, right? Where you gain resources, or it can also be something a bit more neutral, right? Uneventful travels, so no effect. That would just be discarded. The other ones you'd have to take care of whatever it says you need to deal with from the actual event card. So in addition to the boon, bane, and neutral type cards, there's also some specific cards with additional tokens. The first of which is a card, an event card called Space and Time, which is for a wormhole. So the game comes with 2 wormhole tokens, right? So if that event card were picked here, you'd put a wormhole down in this sector where it was discovered, and then you have the option to put the other counterpart, wormhole, up to 4 hexes away. So for the sake of this, I'll just put it over here. Now the 2, because of this connection, these 2 are now considered adjacent hexes within the game. Now that's important for travel, obviously, but it's also used in other modules potentially too, namely, and I know these 2 are adjacent, so let's do this. For sake of argument, this now makes the star Proxima Centauri adjacent to not only these 3 that it's actually adjacent to, but also this one, right? Because of the wormhole connection. Now you can't travel there. This is not a tile you can travel into with the actual star. But with the Proxima Centauri module, the solar winds from that are affecting the adjacent tiles to it, and in addition to that, it's going to be affecting this one as well, because it's considered adjacent now. And we'll go over that more with the Proxima Centauri module, but that's something to point out. In addition to that module, communication satellites, another module, requires that you build the satellites adjacent to each other. So again, if I put this other one here, these are now considered adjacent, and if I built a satellite here, I could build one here as well without having them adjacent without the wormhole, right? So these now are considered adjacent. This also affects the new scenarios, and we'll go over that more when I cover the actual scenarios themselves. The next specific card and token is one called Bounty. Okay, so with this one, it offers a bounty token with a, can you see that? 2 victory points on it. So if 2 players turn over, or 2 players are in the hex that this is turned over, it has no effect immediately, right? So it's just gone. If, however, it's just a single player that picks this card, that player has the option of giving this bounty to any of the other players. Now the way this works is it kind of puts, obviously, a bounty on them, kind of a benefit to try to take them out, because if you do in player versus player combat, you immediately get 2 additional victory points. That does not, if you're in a player combat and you get all wiped out and the player with the bounty gets wiped out, within that player versus player combat, this just gets discarded. No one gets it. If the player with the bounty in any other way, shape, or form gets wiped out from maybe the Centaurian resistance or some other way, that player keeps that bounty until there's some interaction with player versus player combat to determine what happens to this token. The third of these specific cards with an associated token is called Electromagnetic Field. And basically this cancels out any combat within the hex. So no space combat within the hex where this is discovered. So the thing to point out here is a couple things, right? Obviously on the surface there's no space combat that can occur here, either with you and another player, or you with the resistance, the Centaurian resistance ships. This does not, however, affect ground combat with the outpost, with the Centaurian outpost module. It does, however, also affect at the very end of the game, right, where you are counting up victory points. If you are in this with your ships, now we're not talking about having presence on the planet for this 4 victory points for the planet itself, but if you have a ship within a hex at the end, you get 2 victory points for that. If you have any ships in here, the no space combat, electromagnetic field hex, you do not get those 2 victory points at all. So it cancels that out from the space aspect of that hex. And the final event card with an associated token is one called Planet of Interest, with a +2 victory points. And the associated icon. So when this one is used, it basically, as it says, is adding an additional +2 victory points to a planet itself. Right? So if you have the population, you'd get 6 in this case, right? Because there's 4 for the planet existing, and then now this is a planet of interest with +2. So more folks would probably be competing to have the most population there. And remember, if you at the end of the game when you're calculating victory points, if you have the even amount of population, you and another player, you split that. If you have the most, then you get the full 6 victory points, right? One other thing to point out with this module is in terms of WMDs destroying planets. So the game provides these explosion destroyed planet type tokens that are larger than these other tokens. And so the idea here is in the game, in the original game, when you would destroy a planet, you'd basically just flip it over, right? Because the planet's gone, it's just empty space now. However, with this, the exploration are going to have some tiles down until they're explored. So you basically use this, if a planet's destroyed, to cancel out that planet altogether. It stays face up. The one thing to point out with WMDs and destroying planets are they do not affect most of these tokens. And what I mean by that is the bounty obviously is on a player, so that's not applicable. But the wormhole, if you were to destroy Sol here, this wormhole would still exist in space here. This planet exploding does not affect that wormhole. The same is true of no space combat here within this hex. The planet being destroyed here would not affect that. However, the planet of interest, if this planet were destroyed with a WMD, this planet of interest is gone. The planet no longer exists. As a result, planet of interest, it's not very interesting anymore. The other thing to point out, specifically with the wormhole, with the WMDs, since these two are now adjacent, when you're calculating, if you were firing a WMD from this into this wormhole, this is considered just one hex away, right? Because these are now adjacent. So that's another thing to bear in mind with the way the wormhole works in regard to WMDs. An additional point on the space debris, where a planet's been destroyed, in terms of moving through it with your ships or landing on it, either case. So let me get some more ships over here. Yeah, I got another. All right, so if we were in the movement phase and we were going through this sector, so if we ended up here with the debris, or we're even just passing through this particular hex, we're going through a debris field. So we need to roll die equal to the number of ships that are actually going either into this hex or through it. And for every 5 and 6, it's considered a hit, getting hit by the debris, and that needs to be assigned to a single ship of the player's choice. It specifies a single ship. So I guess if you have one that's damaged already, I guess you could put that damage towards that one to absorb that damage, I suppose. But again, maybe some interpretation is needed there, or some house rules come into play. So the last thing to point out with this particular module is the technology that's associated with it, and in this case it is called Sector Scan, and it's only 2 CP to purchase this technology. If you're playing with this module, it's a no-brainer. What this does for you is a number of things. The first thing it does is if you pick a Bane event card, it doesn't apply to you because you have Sector Scan. That's in and of itself, the 2 CP, that's worth it. In addition to that, if you're we talked about the debris fields. If you're flying through or land on a debris field with your ships, you are unaffected by that with Sector Scan with this technology. It seems like it is really underpriced for what it does. So there may be some house rules around this. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts on it? I'm looking forward to playing with it to kind of see how that plays out. But it seems like that's one of my first actions if I'm using this module to purchase this. Moving on to Module 5, New Planets. This is a challenge level 105 and does not add any additional time to the gameplay. So the one thing to point out, I mentioned in the previous module, so if you're playing with the New Planets module and the Exploration module, you choose one of the basic types of planet hexes, all right? The ones that came with either the base game or Edge of Extinction, with CPs, Exinium, or Phasium. From those, you basically can call out what you want to be the planet adjacent to you when using both of these modules. By doing so, then you grab a random. If I chose Phasium and the other player chose CP, that player, from the amount of tiles determined for the map, would choose a random CP one, place it face up next to their home planet, and I would do the same with a random Phasium one, place that face up next to my planet, and if I'm using Edge of Extinction, that becomes my secondary planet or starting hex, as I showed in the previous module. The other thing to point out with this is you have specific limits to the amount of planets that have CP, Phasium, and Exinium, the same way when you built maps before, right? And you shuffle those all up. With these new planet hexes, it's based on the number of players to introduce the new tiles. So they need to be separated from the quote-unquote base tiles from the base game or Edge of Extinction. The distribution for the number of players is with the new planet tiles. With a 2-player game, you add 2 random new planet hexes. With a 3-player game, you add 3 random new planet hexes. With a 4-player game, you add 5. So that jumps up 1 additional new planet hex. And the same applies to 5 players and 6 players. It's 1 additional random new planet hex. Right? So for 5 players, it's going to be 6. 6 players, 7 random new planet hexes from Event Horizon. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the new planet types. Give you a brief overview. I was thinking of going through all the tiles of the new planets, but I should probably put that on the end because people are going to probably want to not sit through that. You can end the video at that point. But so let's go over the new planet types. So the first type is basically planets with no resources whatsoever, but just victory points. Right? So this gives you 6 victory points for this planet type. There are no resources at all. The next planet type is what is termed barren planets. So if you notice here, there's a question mark. CP is what this planet yields. It's got a question mark, and then it has a 4+ with some cracked ground underneath it to signify it's a barren planet. So during resource collection, what the player needs to do is roll a die and needs to get a 4 or greater to get the resources during that resource production action. In addition to that, if you have multiple populations on there mining this planet, and when I say multiple populations, other players, right? So if we both have a presence on this planet, each player needs to roll that die separately to determine if they can gather resources during the resource production phase. Also to point out, this planet never gets depleted, but if you're not rolling well that night, it might as well be, maybe, if you're never getting 4 or greater on your roll for the resource production. The next type is a finite planet in terms of mining. So this starts with 5 Exinium. It has an icon on it that says no mining. So once the resources are gone, they're gone. There's no using a mining action to increase the resources on this planet. It's basically 5 resources will be the only resources ever available on this planet. Once those tick down and are gone, it's depleted. Okay, the next planet type introduces multiple resources now. So when you're mining this, you get 1 of each and can tick those down during the resource gathering phase. So that's an interesting change. Also with mining, if you recall, and there's advanced mining too as a technology in the game, in the base game, but you were able to add 4 when you do a mining action. You can add 4. These would be 2 separate resources to tick up to their maximum. So that it's good in that you could have a presence on a planet and be getting multiple resources, but then with the mining, or advanced mining was 8, it doubled it. So you would need to concentrate on maybe this one planet and tick these resources up during your mining actions. Another planet type is the peaceful planet type, signified by this icon here. The first thing to point out with these planet types are they cannot be targeted by a WMD, either to destroy it, knock out resources, knock out population. They cannot be the target of that. In addition to that, they cannot take on Centaurian outposts if you're using that module. So there's no warfare there. And also if you're playing with Edge of Extinction, and there's an ability for commandos, that cannot be used on this planet either. Space battle, though, outside of the planet itself, space battles can occur. It doesn't. The peaceful planet does not affect things that happen in orbit or around the planet. The final 3 types of the new planets and the new tiles are basically transport, civilian, and military technologies. Right? So if you have presence on these planets, it gives you a discount. In the same way when you research technologies with the specific icons, again, transport icon here, civilian icon, and military, it gives you that discount. The final thing I want to do with this module is just go over all the planets, the new tiles. So if you're not interested in that, I don't know how many people can geek out this much. I would watch this. But your call. So hit stop, go on to the next video, go on to wherever. But that's what I'm going to do now. So let me start with the planets with no resources. And just victory points. So the first one is P1-FF. and that is 6 victory points. No resources. The next one, so there's only 2 of these. This is also 6 victory points. It's MU-1010. Moving on to the barren planets. So this is Faust. It's 4 victory points, CP, and again, it's the barren type planet as discussed. The next one is Bakusk. I guess we could call it that. Another barren planet, 4 victory points, Phasium. Another barren planet, Xenatu. And this is Axinium, 4 victory points, and barren. Moving on to the finite planets, another, this one is Ascunis. Ascuns, maybe? I don't know, let me know. 2 victory points, Axinium, and again, it starts with 5, ticks down, there's no mining on that one. Another finite resource planet, this one is Seyfigla? Seyfigla? We'll call it that. 2 victory points, CP starts with 6, so that's pretty good. The next finite planet is Suran. This is 2 victory points. Phasium starts with 5. Again, finite. It's going to tick down. Kaiora is a dual resource planet. Axinium and Phasium. Starts with 3 and 3. And notice here, no victory points. Glory is CP and Phasium, 4 and 3. And again, no victory points on these dual resource planets. Kaldon, another dual resource planet. 4 CP, 3 Axinium. Moving on to the peaceful planets. So there's K-1300. 2 victory points, 3 Phasium on that peaceful planet. Another peaceful planet, Nylori. And that's 2 victory points and 3 resources of Axinium. Another peaceful planet, which is Sutapani. Right? Sure, why not? 2 victory points and 4 CP on that one. And so now we move into the technology planets, where you get a bonus on technologies. So the first transport planet is D Awas, and that's 2 victory points. And again, here's the icon for transport. 2 victory points and starts with 3 Phasium. And that's a pretty cool one. Looks like lava flow on that planet. I like that one. This is another transport planet. This one is Antlius. 2 victory points and starts with 3 Axinium. The third transport is Behind, and this is 2 victory points and CP, 4 CP. Move on to civilian planets. The P is silent, maybe. Fong. We'll go with that. This is 2 victory points and also CP. And again, we're moving into the civilian planets now. Proxima 2. Another civilian planet, 2 victory points and 3 Phasium. And the final civilian planet is Rockmayak. That is 2 victory points and starting resource 3 Axinium. And finally, the 3 military planets that give a bonus to your military. New Tejas. Alright. 2 victory points. CPs, 4 CPs starts with that. The second military planet is Changtu, and that is 2 victory points, and also Axinium, starting with 3 resources. And the final one is Feria. That one's actually pretty cool looking too. So that's a military bonus, 2 victory points, and a starting 3 phasium for its resources. Hey, thanks for tuning in. That was Module 4, Exploration, and Module 5, the new planets from Event Horizon. Be working on the next modules as soon as I can. Thanks again.